Hello team, welcome to my session on Coffee with Prab, and today we're going to discuss about GRC Analyst. Actually, in every company, the GRC Analyst role is different. So this video is going to be start from zero, what is governance, and we'll also going to discuss about how governance actually implement in the organization. I can proudly say that it is a first kind of a video which cover end-to-end approach of GRC, which include your skill, certification, how practically GRC work in the organization, what are the components, and different perspective of audit. One shop video for entire GRC. I really put a lot of efforts in building this content. So if you're new to the channel, to subscribe to the channel and click on the bell icon to make sure you should not miss my future videos on a similar topic. My name is Prab. For more information, check my LinkedIn profile, because I don't want to spend time on the introduction, but for your information, I have a 17+ year of experience in GRC, SOC, and offensive security. So without wasting a time, let's start with the first part. Thank you. So before we start with actual thing, let's understand the basics first. So what is governance? Okay, so governance is like governing something, or it is basically a framework. Okay, it is a framework for rules, practice, and process that guide how organization is managed and controlled. Now, if you take an example of country like India, let's say example of India. Okay, so we have more than 25 states, right? So we have more than 25 states. Each state has their own belief system. So country like India, country like Pakistan, country like Bangladesh, country like US, UAE and all that. So each and every state, each and every country has their own belief systems. And there are some different resources we have, like people are there, nature is there. So everything need to be managed properly. And to manage them, they need to create a rules. Okay, they need to introduce law. They need to manage them appropriately. So they will form one system. That system is called as a governance. If you take another example, okay, with the same context of India, in India, what happens is we have a ministers. So we appoint ministers. The minister create a law. They create a department, and then they manage them to create a value for us. That is called as a governance. Even when your parents create a rules for you, introduce a processes for you. Okay, every day morning you have to wake up 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock you need to have a breakfast, 11 o'clock you have to go to school, come back. So they're creating a policy which is called as a law for you. They're creating a process how to follow that policy, and by end of the day they're trying to create a discipline to give you the better life. Same like company, in order to manage that company, their resources, everything, they create a rule, they create a practices and processes that guide how the organization is managed and controlled. I want to show you one video, okay? So you get a visibility why governance is important. So if you see this video, you'll get a better visibility. He just directly jump into the car. No parking, nothing. Breaking a glass. So you can see the way of taking taxi. It is against the law. Wherever you park, you jump and you break the glass. No one care. Even it is mentioned no helmet. He's still wearing a helmet. And now you see the entry. Tan tan tan. So that is a perfect example of bad governance. Now understood? So if they have a system, if they have a law, if they have some policies, then nothing will be happening like that. So that's why I call governance ensure accountability, transparency, alignment with the goals and objective. So it is like governance, which is a process of governing or overseeing the control and direction of something. Okay, if country creating governance, country governance. If parenting creating a rule for their kids, That is called parenting governance. So now question is, why governance matter in the organization? Okay. So the first part, why governance matter? Why? Because the first biggest reason is direction. See, when you're talking about governance, governance set the organization goals, okay, and their strategic directions. Just like family, you have a family. So family is something which set the goals. Okay, they set the goals. They set the the goals, like they want to planning a vacation. So, or they want to save for a new car, or making sure kid do wells in a school. So governance in an organization also set the goals and directions. Okay. So if you take an example, this is the bank we have. So this bank is doing offline business in Delhi or Melbourne. Offline business means there's nothing online. Everyone has to go to bank and avail the services. Now the bank understood they want expansion, they need to introduce IT. So they have given instruction to CIO, plan the IT function. Then CIO get the information from a COSO, ensure the security. All these part of a strategic direction. So the family have a strategic direction to save money, spend quality time together, or prioritize education. Same like the company basically have a strategic direction. Okay, this year this plan, next year this plan. And if the organization has an appropriate strategy and everything, that shows a good governance. That's why governance matter. Second is called as an accountability. See, it ensures your decisions are made responsible with a clear and accountability at every level. That's why if you notice in your company, you have a RACI matrix. RACI matrix. So someone is responsible, someone is accountable, someone is need to be consulted and informed. Okay. So in a family, same, everyone has a responsibility. So parent might manage the finance, older kids might help with the chores, and younger kids are responsible for their schoolwork. So governance ensure everyone know their roles and it can be counted on. So if anything happen, for instance, a family can quickly see who was supposed to do what, hold them accountable. So they have a visibility. So accountability is very important. The third important thing, risk management. In my further slide, we discuss in detail. So governance structure helps to identify, assess, and control the risk. Same like your family face risk too, like managing expenses, staying safe, or preparing for emergencies, right? So governance in a family involve planning for those risks, like saving for unexpected expenses, or having emergency contacts, or teaching kid about safety. And this way risks are minimized. Now let's say example, I'm getting every month salary of $10,000. Suppose I have a kid. I don't have a kid, but suppose I have a kid. Now he said today he need a PlayStation. So I have to see my finance and I will see, okay, can I gift him a PlayStation in this budget? And if I gift him PlayStation from this cost, can I able to run my entire house? Understood? So here I'm doing a risk assessment because I don't want if tomorrow buy and I have to face the consequences. Same like company when they go for new project and all that. So project can give reward also, but it can also give a liability. A good company is the one, a good governance is the one we do risk management, because ultimately we have to reduce the risk and prepare for the surprises. And last is called as a governance called compliance. Why governance matter in the organization? Because of compliance. So like example, my father has set the rules for me. So I have to abide with that rule. So I am using a word called comply with the rule. Understood? So family follow the rules, right? So compliance ensure we adhere to the law, regulations, and internal policy, which protecting the organization from fines or reputational damage. So compliance here, like family follow the rules or maintain the harmony to ensure everyone well-being, like bedtime, limit on screen time, or taking turns with responsibility, right? Like on the dinner time, no phones. So we have to comply with the rule. Rule was set under the governance. So because if you see the word GRC, governance, risk management, compliance. So during a governance, we set the rule and now we have to comply. If we don't comply, there is a risk, right? So during a part of a building process, they have ensured no one will basically take a phone during a dinner time. And this is basically, we have to comply, right? So compliance basically ensure you adhere to the specific things. Okay, now question is overall why governance matter. So in this example, you notice, right, without governance, family might struggle. Okay, if you don't have a direction, the family might struggle with unexpected goals, confusion over the responsibility and conflict around a rule. And by setting a goal and ensuring accountability, we can prepare for risk and maintaining a rule, and the family can build a healthy, organized and supportive environment, just as a governance does for the organization. That is why governance matter today in the organization. So let's discuss the next part, a key element of governance. So the question is, what are the key elements of the governance? The first important element is policy and standard. Everyone has to wake up on time. It's a law created by, it's a policy or it's a rule of my house. Same like every system must be protected with the password. That is a policy. Policy is nothing, it is like a law of the company. Same like policy which is created for my house, it's a law of my house. But the standard is what time we have to wake up. Like policy say that we have to wake up on time, but question is what is the time? 7 a.m. is the standard time. It is for me and for my cousin. So the first important component, which is a foundation for any company governance, is policy. So if you want to check the maturity of any company, first ask for the policy. Okay, so governance includes setting up the policy. Okay, and standard that define the expected behavior and operational practice. And these policies helps to establish what is allowed, required or prohibited within the organization. Same like I said, in family, policy are like house rules such as no phones at dinner table or bedtime at 9 p.m. So these rules set clear expectation what is allowed or what is not. And they help everyone understand what behaviors are expected to maintain harmony at the home. That is why any kind of an activity you want to introduce, policy is the first step. Second important element is called roles. So governance define who is responsible for various activities. So there should not be any surprises. Okay. And this is something we document as a decision within the organization. And this ensures the accountability and clarity so that everyone understands their duties from a senior management to the individual contributor. So every family member has a specific role. Like parent may handle the finance, grocery shoppings, older kids will taking care of the trash or doing the dishes. And so role makes sure everyone know what they're responsible, and this reduces the confusion and making the family run smoothly. That is why in your company you have a RACI matrix. Third is that whatever the policy standard we have to follow, it is followed by the procedures. Okay. So on one side, we are saying we have to go on bed 9 a.m. or 9 p.m. So what is a process? What is a procedure? Or I have to set 8-character password. So what is a process? What is a procedure? So governance outline the procedures that ensure consistent, okay, reliable, and repeatable outcome. So these processes are especially important in the critical areas like risk management, compliance, and quality control. I'll give an example. So I have appointed a DR coordinator, disaster recovery coordinator. He created a procedure or she created a procedure. Now in her absence or in his absence, someone can follow the procedure blindly, and that is called as a good governance. So procedures are the one which generate the same results. Consistent results, like procedures, like processes in a family, like routine such as getting ready for the school in the morning, or each steps is organized. Everyone wake up, eat breakfast, brushes their teeth and get dressed. So these routines helps the things to ensure in a predictable way, so no one miss the school bus or forget their lunch. That's why that's a very important part. The next thing is called as accountability and oversight. So governance provide the mechanism to monitor the activities, okay, which is other to the policies and all that. And this oversight bodies like board of directors or governance committee, they review the report. Because if you ask me, the overall function of governance is three. So we have a governance part: evaluate, direct, and monitor. And this is my operation team. When they work on that, this is basically oversight by the board. So board is the one who always get a reports on regular basis, because by that they get a visibility, and it is very important to have that. Okay, it is very important. So same like, we collecting our audits, we doing an audits, we review the reports, and by this you can hold the people accountable for their actions. That's why when you face any audits and all that, auditor give you the recommendation and then do the follow-up. Okay, that's the important part. So accountability in a family mean making sure everyone does their part. So parent check if cleaning has been done properly, or if homework is completed, I'm sure you also experienced that. So that's an example of oversight. Next important thing, a good governance is the one where whatever the strategy you have set, whatever the initiatives you have set, it is aligned with the business goals. For instances, governance might ensure security practices align with the business goals. So that good security governance is the one which align with the business goals. Or family might have a goal like saving money or vacations. So making sure everyone eat healthier. So governance helps to align daily activity with these goals. Understood? So that is something is part of the function. So these are the key components we have. Now let's understand how the overall organization works in the functions. Okay, so we're going to discuss now type of governance. So that give you the better visibility. See, when we're talking about organization hierarchy, so this is how the actual organization works. So the first part is called as a CEO. Okay, now before going to discuss this, I want to discuss the hierarchy. So as I said, governance is a set of operation. Okay, so under the governance, we have an important element. Let me change the color. Okay, so under the governance, we have first thing, which is called as a corporate governance. Corporate governance. Okay, and corporate governance is the one who set the goal. Okay, they are the one who set the goals, and they are the one who set the direction. Hey guys, we have to start new business. We want to go digital. So that is defined by the corporate governance. Now, who is part of corporate governance? Board and senior management. They are the one who set the goals. So let's say example, we are doing offline business and now we want to do online business. Okay, that is basically my goal. So we have decided, because right now we're doing offline banking. So I want to start banking services in entire Melbourne, and I want to do in Sydney, example, or I want to do in Delhi, or I want to do in Mumbai. So what happened is corporate governance said that, okay, increase business, increase sales and everything. So then it is giving a direction to the IT team, which is called as a IT governance. They create policy, they create procedures, they introduce AI, ML and all that. So this is basically driven by the CIO, Chief Information Officer. So corporate governance given a direction to IT governance. Hey guys, we want to go digital now, support digital. But make sure this digital should be secure. We have a one governance which is called as a information security governance. They create their policy, procedure and all that to protect the business and protect the IT and protect the business. So that's why I say CEO is the one who set the organization strategy. We want to go digital. Fine. CIO will ensure how the digital can support the goals. CISO will ensure how the security can be achieved that. Then security manager create ISMS and all that. Then security admin is there who create a SOC SOP. And this is how the security technical team operate on the local level. So that is how the entire hierarchy works. So to understand better, let's understand one by one each and every statement. Okay. So first let's discuss about the corporate governance. So I already explained you in the previous slide what is corporate governance. So foundation of GRC is corporate governance because they are the one who set the thing. So if you see the hierarchy according to COBIT, corporate governance is the one who follow three things: E, D, M according to COBIT. E stand for evaluate. So they evaluate the legal requirement, regulatory requirement, compliance requirement, customer requirement. In my further slide, we discuss how we arrange the sequence. So they evaluating the market condition and they understood, yes, we have to go digital. Okay, we have to go digital. That is basically my need we have. So corporate governance understand that particular thing, and then they basically giving a direction to the CIO. Okay, so CIO is the one who drive the initiatives. So now CIO got the direction. So now what happened is CIO based on that create a strategy. They create the tactical plan, they create an operation plan. And then, so we have a evaluate, direct. CIO is the one who will do the planning, building, run and monitor. But parallelly, we also have a CISO. CISO also doing a planning, building, run and monitor to make sure it can able to secure the business and provide the report. And this is basically called as a EDM, evaluate, direct and monitor. And CISOs and CIO doing a PBRM. They're creating their strategy that's called IT governance. They're doing their information security governance, and corporate doing their function that's called corporate governance. So corporate governance set the strategic objectives. and it guide the ethical behavior, oversee the compliance with legal regulatory requirement. So their major focus will be on the board oversight. They want the executive to be accountable. They want transparencies, and they are actually accountable for anything what is happening in the organization. So, but the challenge is basically balancing profitability with the social and environmental responsibilities, because they have to run the business also, but also respect the culture and everything. And they are the one who set the regulated landscape, and they follow the top-down approach. Without governance, we can't implement anything. Remember that without governance, we can't implement anything. So that is basically called as a corporate governance. Now, second is called as a IT governance. They are the one who align the IT strategy with corporate objectives. As I said, the bank has decided they want to go online, right? Now, they are the one who creating an IT strategy to ensure how can they go online. So they are the one who managing a risk associated with the digital transformation, and their focus area is how to allocate the resources, how to create a performance metrics, risk management, and integrate with the business goals. But challenge is basically as the technology get changed today, you can see there is a need of AI, artificial intelligence, machine learnings and all that. So they have to see how can they optimize the IT investments and everything. Now next is called as a information security governance. See, in some companies, information security reports to IT. In some companies, information security directly report to the board. So here the information security governance ensure the protection of information asset through the policy, standard and framework. And their focus area will be data protection, risk assessment, incident response, compliance and everything. Challenges as things getting changed and all that, growing balance is there. So how to comply with legal regulatory, how to maintain security is the most important part. See, when you talk about information security, under the information security, we have a cyber security. So difference is cyber security is protecting our digital assets, and information security protect all type of assets. All type of asset. I repeat again, information security protect all type of asset, where cyber security protect digital assets. If I have a laptop, it has a data that will be protect under the cyber security. I will keep this laptop in the physical locker that come under the physical security. Okay. And in the information security, we have a 3 goals: maintain the confidentiality, integrity and availability. Like I want to make sure whatever the information we collect, it will be protect from unauthorized disclosure. It is a user who decides this information should be available to one person, to this person. Apart from that, if it's available to anyone else, it's a breach of confidentiality. Whatever the information we provide, it must be accurate. That is called integrity. And third is it must be available whenever it required. It is same like, right, you're sharing your secret with your friend and he told everyone. Will you trust him? No. So it's a breach of confidentiality. You ask for some advice and he gives some wrong advice. Will you trust him again? No. That is the integrity. He said, okay, whenever you need, I will be available. And he was not available when you need. That is availability. So that is how the governance, risk, compliance and information security works in the organization. Now, this is the summary, okay? So here you can see corporate governance set the strategic objective for IT. Okay, they are the one. So first is set the objectives. We also define the compliance requirement that we need to comply with the legal regulatory requirement. And then they basically expecting a IT risk assessment report from IT, but IT get this assessment from the information security governance. Okay, information security governance and IT implement the security controls. Information security governance report to CIO on the IT security metrics. They do the risk assessment end to end to make sure things are working correctly, so that they get a reports on regular basis, and they also report the IT performance. So this is basically the overall type of governance. Now we're going to discuss about a day in a life of a GRC analyst. See, in different company, the people does different role. Okay, in some company GRC analyst mean doing an audit work. In some company, GRC analyst is the one who does the risk assessment and the implementation of a control. So let's understand the day of a life of a GRC analyst. So you get a visibility what kind of a role he does. Okay, let's move to the next part. Okay, so now the question is why we need a GRC analyst. Actually, this is a very buzzword, GRC analyst. So in some companies, it is a role of an auditor. In some companies, GRC analysts do risk assessment. So I want to share you a very good summary day of a life of a GRC analyst, and this is something I got from the participant who really worked on GRC. You need to understand one thing: GRC analysts are essential for ensuring your business resilience, reducing risk exposure, and maintaining a competitive edge. I will explain you with an example. I have a budget of 10,000 rupees, okay, or $10,000. Now I want to invest. So one is that, or you have a $10,000. Okay, now you tell me, if you want to invest in a stock market, will you use your knowledge or will you trust the subject matter expert of the stock market? Definitely you will take the help of the stock market expert, because they're good with that. They predict the issues, they predict everything, and according to they will tell you, okay, invest money here or invest money there. That is how it works. Same like company, when they go for any new initiative, like company has decided to go for cloud. Without doing any analysis, simply move to the cloud, and tomorrow cloud was down. So cloud was down, it impacted your business, and you are now saying sorry to a customer. To avoid that, we assume, okay, if you go tomorrow there, what going to be happen? If we take this initiative, what going to be happen? So that is where the company hired GRC analyst. So you run your business and you run your IT, you run all the activity with limited impact. So they bridge the gap between the operational efficiencies, regulatory compliance, and risk management, and make them, important asset to any organization. Today, GRC analysts use for cost saving, it's supporting a business goals, and they're also protecting the organization reputations and everything. So we're going to discuss in detail what are the different profiles we have. So normally they start with, I'm assuming 9 to 5. So they start with the first is checking old emails and all that. They also check into GRC system, which is called GRC Archer and all that. There's a tool called Archer, ARCHER. Okay. So ARCHER, Archer tool. So they check into GRC system for any pending task, such as any upcoming compliance, deadline, audit schedules, and open risk assessment. And they try to update day-to-day list with the high priority items and focus on key risk. Like example, yesterday they wanted to follow up today for something new issues. So they have a task list. Okay, today to, how many of you, to which they have to do follow up. So that is called as a review day priority. Then 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. they have a review the risk posture and monitoring control. So they review the organization current risk postures, including the KRI for unusual activities. They check the reports on system vulnerabilities, access control logs they received yesterday, and based on that they're planning the future audits. And they also do the daily security briefings. Okay, because this is something I've created from an information security GRC perspective. So they check the reports, they monitor the effectiveness of internal controls and access controls, incidents, and everything. So daily security briefing include attending a daily weekly meeting with IT security team, risk management team to discuss about current risk, compliance, and everything. And they also share relevant updates on compliance requirement, like, okay, DPDP is coming, they demand security controls, or DORA is coming, they demand as respective controls. So collaborate with security team, prioritize and address all the urgent security compliance issues. Then we do the compliance and policy review, where we perform compliance. So now I'm talking about from the point of view, you're working for the company who provides services and you're handling multiple projects. So now you have a time, because business also just started. So you want to schedule the meeting with the business teams. So you do the compliance and policy review, you do the policy review updates, you document findings, create a remediation plans and everything, whatever the old documents you have. Then in the afternoon, you got a one task about doing a vendor risk assessment. So you're conducting a risk assessment, you're involved with vendors, identify their issues, and then afternoon you're doing a security awareness, preparing and reviewing reports. Again, I'm telling you, each and every activity will also will take one day. Example, today you're starting a GRC role. Okay, so this is your one day activity. This is a one day activity. This is the one day activity. This is a one day activity. So you need to understand one important thing in company. When I say GRC, some people only appointed in GRC to do this activity. Okay, so in some companies, we have a very specific role, like there's a dedicated person has been appointed to this activity. There's a dedicated person has been appointed for this activity. There's a dedicated person has been appointed for this activity. Okay, and this activity is common in all the things. So like example, when I'm doing a vendor risk assessment, so we have a dedicated team called TPRM specialist. Okay, doing just a risk assessment for projects, we have a risk analyst. Risk analyst, is it clear? There's a dedicated person has been appointed for compliance assessment, okay, or security control assessor, and there is a dedicated person has been appointed as a security engineer. So in GRC also we have a different vertical. So let me explain you with the one slide that give you the better visibility. So here you can see the profile. Any person, any fresher who always started his journey, I highly recommend, if you are a fresher, target for big four companies, because when you work for big four, you're handling different customers. So there you have a profile called GRC Analyst or GRC Associate. Governance, risk and compliance. It means you're creating a governance also, you're doing a risk assessment also, and you ensure you comply with everything. Your role is not an auditor there. So there you will assess the risk, develop the policies and conduct the internal audit. Internal audit is there. So question is how to start GRC analyst role. So my humble request is start with Security Plus first, because you get a visibility of IT and IT security basics. Before Security Plus, it is always recommend to do A plus and N plus. I'm not saying, okay, you do certification. If you can see the content which is available on A plus, N plus, you can check that, then Security Plus, and then ISO 27001. The reason is very simple, is because when you managing risk, like example, I want to manage my finance risk. So I should know what is finance. If I'm managing cloud risk, I should know first cloud is what. Same like when you managing a risk of an entire infrastructure, you should know what is infrastructure. So A plus and N plus, CompTIA A plus and N plus give you that visibility. What is network, how the computer works, what are the protocols, and then Security Plus give you the holistic view. So A plus, N plus, Security Plus will give you the foundation. Okay, drop a comment in a section box if you want me to create an end-to-end video on Security Plus. Okay, and ISO 27001 is all about implementing governance. There is a dedicated playlist I've created. I can proudly say that that playlist will give you the end-to-end visibility to 27001. It is a video which has more than a content than you pay for any training companies. Okay, so that is there. So you can check that. So that is a role called a GRC analyst. And in some companies, what happened, we have a dedicated role for risk analyst. So we have a risk analyst. Mostly this vertical you can see in the financial vertical. If you join any bank, okay, if you join any bank or financial institution, there we have a risk analyst. So they basically identifying risk, work with the IT team, managing controls, because when you work in a financial department, when you're working in the financial business, they are highly regulated business. They can't take any call and they can't take any risk. So they hire the risk analyst who do the risk assessment in all the vertical: business risk assessment, process risk assessment, IT risk assessments. So my recommendation is that there also I will recommend start with Security Plus, then do ISO 31000, because it gives you visibility about enterprise risk management. Enterprise risk management cover your operational risk, IT risk, business risk and all that. And then if you're looking for the lead position, then you can go for C risk. One thing I want to tell you, if you are a if you're not from a finance background, then it is difficult to get a top position in this vertical, which is called CRO, because most of the CROs are the company hire from a finance background. Is it clear? So if you are looking for a top position in risk analysis, if your background is non-BCom, so if you're non-BCom, if your background is not a finance, then it is very important. It is difficult to get the position like CRO. I'm not saying you can't do that, but 95% of companies have a CRO as a top position head by the finance team, because they want the risk assessor or risk operational guy from the every vertical. Because finance guy can be teach security, but security person cannot be teach finance thing, right? That's the reason. So internal audit head and CRO, which is the finance part, it is always lead by the finance person. Okay. Then we have now, which is a new profile in GRC, which is called as a privacy and compliance specialist. So nowadays, as you can see, a lot of regulations are coming like GDPR, DPDP, PDPL and all that. So we need a people who ensure our company to be comply with the regulations. So let's say example, there's a new business is coming into the organization. Let's take a hypothetical scenario. There's a new business is coming to the organization. This is the organization. Okay. So there's a new business coming to the organization. So there is a DPO who will interpret this business and see how can we comply with the legal regulatory requirement. Is it clear? And then based on that, DPO is the one who will recommend the information security person, what kind of a controls we need. Let's take an example. We have an office in Bangalore and we have a sales team here. So they are basically supporting a EU customer. Now, as you're supporting a EU customer, you need to be comply with GDPR. So I'm not expecting the sales team to know what is GDPR. So we have a DPO here. DPO interpret the GDPR requirement, and according to that, he will tell the information security team what are the controls we need. He tell the IT team how to manage the IT. So DPO is basically in that case. So nowadays, if you're working in a very regulated industry, especially privacy and all that, we have a now new profile, which is basically called as a compliance specialist, where again, for that also, I will highly recommend start with 27001. Okay, because that give you the security visibility. We also have a ISO privacy standard. You can go with that. And then if you're specializing in particular privacy regulation, then CIPPE and CIPM. That's something you can do that. Now we have a new profile, which is called IT auditor. So mostly in Big Four, the one who does the audit and all that, they do the IT auditors. They are the one who audit the controls. They are the one who audit the IT systems. Highly recommend start with CompTIA Security Plus and A+ and N+, and then do CISA. And then you can go for CIA. That is recommended. And now we have a third line of defense in the company, which is called as a internal auditors. Internal auditor. So they are the one who audit the business. They are the one. Actually, IT auditor is part of internal audit also. IT auditor can be work as a separate function also. So in my further slide, we're going to discuss about third line of defense. So that there you get a visibility. So internal auditor can be the one who audit the business. They are the one who audit the process, IT and security. If you're in the security, then IT auditors has been appointed. Otherwise, we have a business and other auditors. And recommended certification is start with 27001 or 9001 and then go for CIA. And now we have another profile, which is called as a vendor risk analyst, which is called as a TPRM specialist. So they are the one who assess the vendor before we onboard them for the business. Again, for them also CTRP is there, but before that 27001, 31000, and then you can go for CTRP. So more so is that we have a core skills, which is required is technical skills, basic understanding of cybersecurity, data privacy regulations, and risk management framework we have. That is important. Then we have a analytical skill. Analytical skill is you can able to analyze the data, identify risk, and interpret the policies. Then communication is very important, because if you don't communicate properly, you cannot able to convey things, then that doesn't make sense. So at one point of time, communication skills are important. And basic solid foundation, English writing, English writings and practice. Along with that, basics of cyber, basics of IT is very important. That is why I highly recommend when you're making career in any part of GRC in this, any vertical, A+, N+ is minimum thing, because at least you should know computers. That's a very important part. Okay. So next is called as a day in a life of a IT auditor also. Okay, because GRC cover your risk specialist, TPRM specialist, and governance. But for the auditor, we have one thing. So I'm taking a day in a life of IT auditor. Suppose there is one auditor who got a task that he need to conduct one audit for one project. Okay, so how will he do that? So he basically start the day by reviewing the audit plans. Okay, scopes. This include understanding the area, system, controls has been tested. Okay, do let me know in the comment box. Shall I make a dedicated video on that? And there's already one dedicated video how to conduct internal audit. Okay. Then we have a late morning, which is called as a field work. Field work is you conduct a particular audit, you drive the particular audit. So that is basically called as a field work, which involves reviewing the documentation, inspecting the logs, conducting interview. Let's say example, I'm doing an audit of change management process. So I will collect the documents of change management and everything. Then we have a sample data analytics. We select the sample of data because it is not possible for me to do the audit of every systems. So here what happened is we doing an audit. We doing a samples of the systems, and based on that, we do the audit. So that something is part of the function. Okay, so then we evaluate the evidences and document findings, and then afternoon, we analyze the data, we prepare the recommendations, and we have an exit meeting. Why I'm going very fast here? Because there's an already dedicated video I made how to conduct the internal audit. Okay, and late afternoon, you refine the findings, recommendations, audit reports, and next steps. So this is how the role of an IT auditor happen in a day of a life. There's a dedicated video I made on the IT audit. Do check that. Okay, so this is a summary. If you're talking about GRC platforms, we have tools like RSA, Archer, ServiceNow, Metrics Teams. Again, I'm telling you, this video has not been promoted by any vendor. I'm just giving you this visibility so that tomorrow you encounter any interview, so you should have a visibility. Then if you're doing a risk assessment, we have a tool like RiskWatch or Resolver, or you can use your own Excel sheet. For SIM, we have a Splunk QRadar because we need to collect data. For data governance, where you need to classify, because now in data privacy, data governance tool is very important because it helps you to classify and organize the data, right? So we have a Varonis or OneTrust. And for documentation, you can use Excel, PowerPoint and all that. It is very important if you are into GRC. If you are into GRC, then it is very important to have a good understanding of Excel, Word and PowerPoint. So in next section, we're going to discuss about what is legal and regulatory, which is creating a lot of doubt in the buzz in the market. So now next thing is that when you start any organization, okay, we already discussed that, okay, the first thing, wherever you operate, you need to respect the law of the land. So, when you're working in the GRC or privacy, you always use this word, you always get to know this word is legal, regulatory. So I want to clarify this. What is the difference? We have not even started. Okay. We're just covering all the basics. Okay. So when you start any organization or when you start working in any organization, the first thing they say, follow legal or regulatory. So legal mean the obligation enforced by law, established by government. Okay. Applicable on individual or organization. So ultimate goal of legal requirement is to protect the interests of the citizen. If you take an example in India, law created by ministers, okay, and enforced and followed by the courts. And the purpose is that to operate within the national and state law. Simple is so this is your house. So there's a law of the house. You have to respect the law of the house. Same like when you go to any country, you have to respect the law of the country. In India, Saturday, Sunday is off. But if you go to Saudi, there is a Friday and Saturday off. If you work in Oman, Friday, Saturday off. So you have to respect the law of the country. So law is introduced to protect the interests of the citizen. Now, if you take an example of HIPAA. So HIPAA is the Health Data Protection Law. SOX was a financial reporting law for the corporations. That's what we have. On the other side, regulations are set for a particular industry. So let's say example, law was introduced to protect the interest of the citizen. Now in India, for the particular industry, they cannot have the same law. So they introduce a regulation authority. Regulation authority was introduced to control a particular industry. Like in India, if you want to start insurance, you need to be comply with IRDA. If you want to start any kind of financial services, you need to be comply with this is called RBI. If you want to start any kind of a food kitchen and all that, you need to be comply with FSSAI. So regulation was introduced to control a particular industry, but that is abide by the law of the country. So if you fail to abide with the IRDA, they will have authority to enforce a penalty. And if you fail to follow the penalty as per the law, they can send you jail. So regulations are rules set by the regulatory bodies to enforce specific law mandatory for organization, to ensure the specific sectors, compliance and everything. Like in GDPR, we have a EU-based data protection applied to EU-based data protection also applied to US company if they're doing a business and collecting a data in Europe. CCPA is a California Consumer Privacy Regulation applicable for California user. EU here mean based on data protection, apply in EU, but if they're doing a business, if the US-based company doing a business in EU, they have to comply with GDPR. SEBI regulation, financial market and security regulation, RBI guideline for banking. So this is basically called as a regulation. So when we're talking about the governance, their first primary requirement is IT governance, information security governance, corporate governance is to be aligned with the business objective. Yes. So they have to be aligned with the business objectives. So they have to ensure all these activities, all the initiatives, whatever we have, it support the organization strategy. Remember the case of Ashley Madison. They're scaling up their business, but they're not scaling up the IT. So IT is not aligning with the organization objective. And what happened? They got hacked. So, or another example is company want to prioritize the customer privacy. So we'll have a government policy which focus on data protection, minimize data collections accordingly. So that something is part of a requirement. On the other side, we do the governance because we need to comply with the regulatory requirement. Okay. We have to comply with the regulatory requirement like HIPAA, SOX, GLB and all that. So that's why we always follow top-down approach. Now, when we start any business, when we work in any organization, we have a requirement. So I have seen a lot of people, they always get confused with legal regulatory, how it works. So legal and regulatory is part of one, which is called as a regulatory requirement. So when you join any GRC or COSO or security job and all that, the first thing you have to respect the law of the land. And if they're doing any business in that law, in that country, they have to respect the regulatory of the industry. So let's say example, if there's a US based company doing a business in India, like example, Bank of America doing a business in India for Indian citizens, they have to be compliant with RBI. So regulatory requirements are always called as a non-negotiable. You have to customize your business, but they cannot customize their regulatory. And they also always come with the deadlines, strict compliance mandate, and potential penalties. So and failing to meet this can result in legal issues. Like example, like if organization handling the personal data, it must be compliant with GDPR or HIPAA. That is there. So that is something is called. So we implement the controls to make sure it addresses the legal regulatory requirement, like data access policies, access controls, audit loggings, and all that. So first we understand the regulatory requirement is then instructed by the stakeholders, because stakeholders are the one who want to follow regulatory. They want to achieve the business. So once the regulatory requirements are met, we need to focus on stakeholder requirement, which helps to build the trust and credibility. So we satisfy the stakeholders such as customers, shareholders, business partners, and they can directly impact the organization's success. Example like protecting customer data, strong encryptions, establishing a financial transparencies, through the regular audit to meet the stakeholder need. So that is something is called, like example, there's a bank in this world which is known for his secrecy, which is called Swiss Bank. So it's a stakeholder requirement. They want us secrecy, and they know if they build the trust and credibility, they can able to gain things. The third is called as a business requirement. So when it comes to the business requirement focus on improving the efficiencies, reducing operational risk, and supporting a strategic goals. And these are the essential for long-term success. Example like streamline the internal processes, implement the better IT change management, or establishing a regulated backups. So we implement the controls which can help the organization to meet its internal objective, like example like automatic workflow, SOP, access management. So that's how it works. So let's say example, GDPR is a requirement. Now business has a requirement to protect the data privacy, and then we implement some kind of a SOC control, which is a part of business requirement to achieve the regulatory and stakeholders. So that's how the sequence works. So when you're talking about any organization, the organization GRC is operate in a 3 sector. Actually, if you see, first line of defense, second line of defense, and third line of defense, we're going to discuss in detail. So if any business is operating, this is basically supported by 3 types of governance: first line, second line, and third line. Actually, this is called as 3 wings which support the business. And when you say you want to make a career in GRC, either you're making career in first line, you're making a career in second line, or you're making a career in third line in GRC. So now we're going to discuss one by one, each in detail. But before that, I want to tell you the purpose. The 3 line of defense is a model, which is a recognized framework which helps the organization to manage the risk and ensure the accountability, robust governance. And each line actually play an important role in identifying, managing, mitigating risk. Is it clear? That is the significance. So first is called as a first line of business. So first line of defense is called as an operational management. They are the one who own and manage the risk directly. So when you're talking about first line of defense, they are the one who implement the control to manage the risk and directly associate with the function. So responsibility like identifying, managing risk, implementing and executing the controls, and more important, reporting any issues and all that. I will give an example so you get a better visibility. So let's say example, we have a IT team. So they want to ensure access controls are in place and regularly review the user accounts to prevent the unauthorized access. So that is called as a first line. So employee manager within the operational unit are close to the daily activities, and they implement and maintain the internal controls such as policies, managing process, and all that. So let's say example, we have a sales department. So sales department want to ensure the customer data is handled securely by following a data privacy policy, right? So they follow the document process to prevent the unauthorized access. Then we have IT department. IT people are the one who implement the access controls. They make sure they ensure the authorized employee. So that's called, they are the first line of business or first line of defense, which is called as an operational management. Okay. Now, second is called as a second line of defense. So second line is the one who oversight, okay, and monitor the effectiveness of the controls put in place by the first line. So these lines usually comprise risk management, compliance, and control. So identifying the, so example like this is your business. Okay, this is the business. In this business, we have IT controls. Okay, these IT controls are implemented based on risk assessment, and that is something done by the second line. This control is working effectively, that is assessed by the second line. So that's why it's called as risk management and compliance. They are the one who monitor and oversee the risk management practice. They provide guidance, strategy, policies. They monitor compliance, regulatory requirement. Even for this business, if you want to onboard the vendor, so vendor risk assessment has been done on the vendor is done by the second line of defense only. So in some companies, we have a profile called TPRM specialist, third party risk managers. That is part of a second line of defense only. They are the one who assess the vendors before they onboard them for this business to make sure there's no new risk come from the business. Okay, or so that something is there. Or we have a compliance team, we have a data privacy team. So data privacy team, compliance team comes under this particular section, because for this business we need to comply with some regulatory. So compliance team is the one who create a control. So next important element here is, they are the one who develop the risk management framework, standards and policies. They monitor the compliance with policy and regulations, and they provide kind of a risk management team like NIST and support the first line of implementing a control. So example, like we have a compliance team and we have a risk assessment team. So what kind of a jobs will be there is, suppose the company is hiring a TPRM specialist. So they work under this particular team, TPRM. Okay, TPRM. Then compliance manager, risk manager, security manager, data privacy officer, all are basically come under the second line of defense. First line is your IT administrator, operation manager, business process owner, department head. They are basically come under the first line of defense. Then we have a third line of defense or three line of defense, third line of defense. Third line of defense is the internal audit. They are the one who audit the first line and second line. Make sure they're doing their business correctly and they're doing the risk assessment of this business correctly. These two things will be oversight by the internal audit. They are the one who directly report to the board. Okay, so I will give an example. Okay, if I'm an investor and I want to invest money. So my expectation is that, that how they utilize my money is the company is working as per the requirement. So internal audit are not doing any audit based on a certification. So it's a second line who ensure also the audit of the 27001 and all that. So, ISO auditors and all that, they are part of a second line of organization. Second line of defense. They basically prepare the company for any compliance standard and everything. But internal auditors are the one who does the audit based on what they have a policies. Whatever they have agreed on the policies, make sure they should work as per the policies. Are they working as per the policies? And then they provide the independent report to the board. And this is head by the chief audit head. That's why I'm telling you for this position, 99% chances that they always hire a financial person who has a knowledge of financial audit and IT audit, because we can teach financial guy IT audit, but we cannot teach the IT audit financial statements. So 90% of profiles, if you're looking for the C level, mostly it is head by the finance guy. So third line of defense are the providing an independent assurance. They provide the unbiased evaluation how well first and second line are managing risk and other to the compliance. Okay, so we have a different type of profiles here. Internal auditor, we have like IT auditors are there, process auditors are there, business auditors are there. So they all are basically part of the internal audit. Is it clear? So in summary, you can say first line is a business process owner, implement encryption policies. Let's say example, second line, ensure encryption policy meet the regulatories, ISO standard and all that. And internal audit, independent review encryption process to confirm compliance and effectiveness. So here you can see the hierarchy we have. They conduct the independent audits, report findings, recommend, and internal department are the one who provide the control measure. So summary is that if I say first line will be your operation team and all that, that is there. Most of the profile jobs you can see in GRC comes in the second line because you want to do the risk assessment. You want to comply with ISO 27001. You want a DPO. So most of the GRC profile come in the second line. You know, when you say I want to learn ISMS, that is the role of a second line. It's a second line responsibilities to make sure your business is comply with the 27001 standard compliance, data privacy and everything. So DPO has been appointed in second line of defense. Compliance officer has been appointed in second line of defense. TPRM specialist who assess the vendor before we onboard them, part of a second line of defense. Then we have an internal auditor where you get paid for your thought process. They are the one who audit the first line and second line. Okay, so that something is basically there. So now we're going to discuss about the type of audit. It's a very important part. I'm sure you got the new visibility and now you're in page where you got the visibility. What is the career you want to make? Okay. So that something is there. So first party is the one who manage the risk directly. Second line provide the oversight and guidance. Third line give the independent assurance. Okay. So let's start with the next part. So now we're going to discuss about the audit function. Audit function basically is very important. So we have a three type of audit. So we have a first party audit, we have a second party audit, and we have a third party audit. First party audit is an internal audit. We just discussed, right? So what is audit? Audit is a systematic process. I repeat, audit is a systematic process of evaluating an organization processes, control system and operation to ensure they meet the standard regulatory and policy and stakeholder requirement. So when we're talking about the internal audit, so as I said, we have a first line who are doing a business and implementing a control. We have second line who assess the risk in the business and suggest the controls. So third line of defense is the one called as a first party audit. They are the one who auditing the first line, second line. Okay, their audit is based on their defined policy procedure. Let's say example, we are doing an audit of chain management process. So whatever in the process and policy mentioned that, okay, chain need to be closed in 2 days or chain need to be closed in 3 days. Based on that, we do the audit. We check for the artifacts and verify if the chain has been closed in 2 days or 3 days. Here, the certification, here the audit is not based on the certification. Okay. So first party audit is conducted by the organization itself, by someone within the organization. And this type of audit evaluate the organization process, internal controls and compliance. And the purpose is ultimately to assess the internal performance, improve the operation management and provide the visibility. So that is called as a first line of defense. Then we have a second line. So this is done by the, you can say second line defense team. When they onboard any vendor. So let's say example, we have a vendor 1. We have a vendor 2, we have vendor 3, and these vendors are going to support my business, which is my first line. But make sure they should not bring any risk. So we have a second line of defense in the organization who does the audit of these vendors before we onboard them. So when you're doing an audit of your customer, when you're doing an audit of your vendor before you onboard them, that is called a second party audit. Okay, it's also called as a supplier or customer audit. It is conducted by one organization or another, usually as a part of business relationship. So example, like I'm doing an audit of the vendor. Now listen carefully. Okay. I'm doing an audit of this vendor before we providing. So here we have a second line of defense who does this audit. And when this company itself face any audit from other customer, then that is a second line of defense who handle this also audit. That's why it's called as a supplier or customer audit. Okay. Third party audit is when you face independent certification audits, regulatory audits. That is called a third party audits. Is it clear? Independent audit, like you face regulatory audits, you face any ISO 27001 certification audit. That's basically come under third party. So internal audit is the one who audit other first line, second line, internal to the organization and provide the report independently to the board. Second party audit is the one who audit the vendors, suppliers before we onboard them. It is done by the second line of defense of an organization, which is called as a TPRM specialist. Then third party mean your company itself face the external independent audits like regulatory certification audits and all that. So as a management, you have a control on the first party, second party, but you don't have a control on third party. So this is basically part of your audit governance and everything. Now we're going to discuss about what is framework, because when you're implementing control, we follow framework. Okay, so framework and standard is my next point that I'm going to cover. So next thing is basically talk about framework and standard. See, when you're starting or building a cybersecurity in the organization, Okay, any cybersecurity you want to, or any governance, forget about cybersecurity, you want to build governance, you have to use, you want to start with some reference point. Now here the reference point has two things. One, based on experience, you start your governance, or the second is you use some kind of a reference parameter. And here the reference parameter always we recommend is we start with the framework. Let me explain with the example. Let's say example, I want to construct a house. So I will first create a framework. Frame mean boundary. Work is what I have to do. So this is my land. And it is like an imaginary boundary. Now in this boundary, I need everything. I want to create a house. I want TV. I want AC. I want refrigerator. Okay, I want light. That is my minimum necessity to run my house. So that is my framework. That is something is minimum necessity that I have. Okay, but I want a standard TV, which is called LG. So here I'm introducing some metrics. You're getting a point? I'm introducing some metrics here. A quality metrics. Okay, I want a Samsung AC. Okay, so here when I'm saying I'm using a particular name of a brand is basically talk about what? Okay, I need, I want a AC, I want fridge. That's fine. Okay, so that is basically the need, but I want a particular quality of the AC. I want a particular quality of the TV. That is called standard. So framework guides you how to approach. Okay, how to design or improve the process. And standard, which I'm going to discuss next part, define what to implement to achieve a compliance or meet the specific requirement. I will give another example so that give you better visibility. Let's say example, I want to implement cybersecurity in my organization. I want to implement IT function in the organization. Now in the IT, we have a multiple things. Example, like we have a service management. We have a security management. We have a quality management. Okay. And we have a BCP. This is a need. Now I have a choice. So there is a one framework which is called as a COBIT. Now COBIT is available. Okay. Now COBIT talk about the processes what is required to run the IT function. So I refer the COBIT as a framework. My need of the business is required security. So they have a process for security, like create ISMS and all that. So I pick that process for my organization. They have a dedicated process how to implement quality management. They have a dedicated process talk about BCP. Understood? Okay, I want to show you an example. So this is the COBIT framework we have. Okay. So we have a governance and we have a management. So most of the companies use COBIT. So let me type here security. So when I type security here, you can see manage security, define, operate, keep the impact, establish, maintain ISMS, and define, manage risk treatment. Okay, and then monitor. So here what happens is when I refer COBIT, so COBIT is a framework which helped me to adopt what is the process and practice required. So I decided I want ISMS, but I want which kind of ISMS, NIST or ISO 27001, and that is basically where I go for the 27001 standard. So framework, when you're talking about, it is a flexible thing which can be customized as per requirement, and standard come with a certification. Okay, you cannot go to LG showroom and say, can you customize this LG with AC functionality and all that. So we always start with the framework first. We adopt framework. We select the process and practice which part of a business requirement, and what is not required we can ignore it. One more example is you come for my CISSP training or CSAM training. Let's say example. So you're taking this training not for certification. You're taking this training for knowledge. So it is a framework. You will come for domain 1, you can skip the domain 2. So that's why we call framework is used to develop strategies and approach tailored to the organization context. But if you're looking for the consistency, if you're looking for compliance, if you're looking for benchmark, okay, then it is a standard. So example, one of the processes they say you need to have a password management system. So I refer there's one more framework called cybersecurity framework NIST. So as per the framework, they say you need to implement password management system. But I want to go for 14 character password. Then we have a standard called ISO or NIST 852. So this is how it works. So framework is, and that's why you never heard framework come with the certification. Okay, we are NIST CSF certified. Okay, but we always heard this, we are ISO 27001 certified. So I'm sure you're clear. Second is called as standard. Standard is a set of specific detailed requirement criteria that must be followed to ensure the uniformity and consistency. We need a policy, that's a framework, but we need a 8 character password policy, that's a standard. So standard usually mandate for the certification or compliance requirement. So we have an example here. Framework is high level guideline, provide structure like base, NIST, high trust and CIS, and then specific requirement in the process practice come as a standard, which is called specific requirement, which ensure the consistency like PCI DSS, ISO and all that. So we have several frameworks that we need to learn. See, when you are in GRC, you should know this framework because framework is a starting point of building governance in the organization. So one framework is NIST framework, CSF. So that is very important. If you're improving a cybersecurity of an organization, you basically use NIST. It has a 5 to 6 function. There's a dedicated video on that. So if you want to start cybersecurity practice in the organization, so we basically follow NIST there. Okay, NIST has a 2.0. So that is basically NIST 2.0 is a new one, which is already introduced. Okay, so it's already introduced. So you can check that. The reason of, because, it's a GRC analyst series, right? So you should know everything. So in this video, I'm going to touch upon all the basic things. So, later on, you can customize as per requirement. Okay. Second is called COSO. Actually, if you talk about any company, when they start any company and all that, they always start with COSO first. So COSO is a comprehensive framework which helps the organization establish and maintain effective internal control, risk management, governance system, and it is widely used for improving the organization performance, ensuring compliance, and achieving a strategic objectives. Okay, so we're going to discuss in the further slides what is COSO, but for your information, it focuses on 3 things: operation, reporting, and compliance. Okay, and they have a 5 components of internal control. So if you want me to create a dedicated video on that, do let me know. So if you want to start with the governance, most of the companies follow the COSO first because COSO cover all the controls and everything. Then we have a COBIT. COBIT is for IT governance. You want to start IT governance from a scratch. You have a zero visibility how to start. They have a different process and practice like BCP, quality management, 9000 and all that. So instead of following a direct standard, you adopt the process and practice from COBIT, and then you can improve with the help of respective control. And if you're looking for a service management function, like, you're running technology with service management, then you basically use the ITIL. Now we have some standards also. Standards like 27001 is there that you can refer for implementing information security in the organization. Then we have another standard for enterprise risk management, which is called ISO 31000. Okay, then we have a NIST 853, which is a dedicated control for security privacy. The way we have ISMS 27001 2022 annexure. Same like we have a NIST 853, which talk about the NIST specific security and privacy controls. Then if you're looking for the BCMS business continuity and management system, we also have a one standard called 22301. We have a service management called 20000, and for PCI DSS, we have a payment card industry. So we have a different standards that we can basically adopt. Now in this particular series, I'm going to focus more on GRC, which is from the ITGC point of view, because when you see the openings and all that, they always ask, okay, do you have ITGC experience? So that is why in this video, I'm going to very specifically talk about ITGC, okay, which stand for Information Technology General Controls. And they are the foundational controls within the organization IT environment. Okay. Now question is, why ITGC? Because if you see any big jobs and all that, they always say you need to have a SOX with ITGC experience. So ITGC is very important because it ensures the integrity, reliability, security of information system. Okay. And data with supporting both operational and financial process. So it was introduced to address the need for standardized controls over the IT system. So in US, what happened is after the Enron fraud, which has happened in 2002, SOX mandate the company needs to have a corporate governance, educate controls over the financial reporting. Same like now, if you want to invest in any company, you will always look for financial reports. So SOX has mandate any company who going to be public listing, they need to demonstrate the reports and they need to demonstrate the internal control over the financial reports. And one of the section of internal control were ITGC. So these controls are crucial for maintaining a secure IT environment, especially for organizations subject to regulatory requirement or involved in financial reporting. So organization began relying more heavily on IT systems in the later stage, and they need to ensure these systems were both reliable and secure. And that is where there is a one requirement called Sarbanes-Oxley. So SOX in the US we have, which demand strict control over the financial reporting. So one thing you need to understand is your financial report is run and drive through some kind of a IT system. So this is the financial report. That report is running on any IT systems. How adequate is the IT system? For that we have a control called ITGC. So this term came from there only. Like you need to have, these are the mandatory IT controls on your IT system, because through this IT system you're generating this report. So that's why this was specifically critical for the organization subject to the regulatory requirements such as SOX in the United States, which demands strict control over the financial reporting to prevent fraud and ensure data integrity. Okay. So what is the key objective of ITGC? So ITGC ensure the integrity by establishing a secure control environment for data processing. Because if you work in the financial industry and your company is international or company is listed in the US stock market, your reporting and everything is very important, because based on your data only the company invest, right? So the key objective of ITGC is whatever the financial reports we are generating, okay, it should be accurate. We minimize the risk of data tampering, errors or unauthorized access. Second, we have is reliability of the IT operations. Okay, so ITGC support the reliability in consistent IT operations to ensure systems are accessible and data is backed up and changes are managed properly. Then regulatory requirement is also there, comply with SOX, HIPAA, GDPR. And last is ITGC is a part of broader risk management strategy. So it helps to identify, mitigate IT risk is very important. So this is the key objective of ITGC. So these are the controls in ITGC we have, team, for your knowledge. Okay, so access control is an area, change management is one area, IT operation is one area, data backup and recovery is one area, and each and every area has a respective objectives, you can see. And these are the controls are required to implement. So I'm not saying you have to follow 27001, but ITGC itself has some controls, like you need to have a control for user access management, role-based access control, multi-factor authentication, access review, change approval, testing process, segregation of a duty, incident management, system monitoring, regular backups, offset storage. So that something is part of the ITGC. So in my next point, I'm going to discuss about COSO. That's the next important thing we have. Okay, so if you are in GRC, COSO you should know, because COSO is called as a mother of all framework. Okay, so COSO stand for Committee of Sponsoring Organization of Trade Away Commission. Okay, so what happened is, let me first give you the brief history. So in 1985, this COSO was formed to, combat financial fraud and improve the internal control. And 1992, COSO introduced its first internal controls, okay, which is called as an integrated framework, which become the foundation for modern internal control system. Okay, from there the word origin comes is internal control. And in 2004, COSO introduced the enterprise risk management framework, which expanding its focus from internal control to include the holistic risk management. And in 2013, COSO framework was updated to address all the challenges like governance, technology, and global business environment. So in summary, you can say internal control in COSO framework is all about creating structured, reliable process that support the organization goals, protect the assets, and ensure the accurate reporting and maintain the compliance, and helping the organization to operate smoothly and responsibly. And COSO was introduced to create one unified framework for internal control and risk management, and addressing the the need for the strong governance, ethical practice, and all that. So when I say COSO, here we have three important objectives. First is called as an operation. Okay, the first is called as an operation. So to ensure the operational activities are efficient and effective, which include safeguarding asset and preventing fraud. So we have an example like, okay, they have a controls like to streamline and financial assets are protect from misuse. Second is called as reporting. They promote the reliable financial and non-financial reporting, because based on that investor invest money. So reporting is basically ensure we generating accurate financial reports to stakeholder. And third is called as a compliance. Compliance means you have to comply with legal regulatory. So in this section, we are complying with GDPR and SOX. So when you're talking about COSO, okay, so COSO framework provide the guidance on designing, implementing and maintaining the internal control, which cover the control for corporate governance, IT governance and all that. So in COSO, we have a 5 integrated component. Now, please understand this carefully. We have a total 5 integrated component. The first is called as a control environment. So control environment, you can see it is a foundation for all the components, and it actually set the tone. Okay, it is basically set the tone at the top. Same like the policy is a foundation for governance. So policies start from control environment. And this includes your ethics, integrity, oversight, which is like a culture for an organization. Let's say example is leadership need to establish the code of conduct, and they want to ensure that they adhere to the organization policies. So that is called as a control environment. Second is called as a risk assessment. So as I said, when you set up the code of conduct, you have to assess the risk. So you identify, analyze risk to achieve objectives and determine the risk response. So company here assess the risk associated with the new IT systems, implementations, and we are introducing some activities like policy, procedures and all that. Next is called as a control activities, so which include policy, procedure, actions to mitigate risk. An example like implementing access controls, require approvals for financial transactions, separation of duty. Okay, then we have a information communication, which is all about whatever the controls you have implemented, you have to convey. So we have to ensure the relevant information flow throughout the organization to support the decision making, like regular reporting of control performance to the management. And finally, we have a monitoring activity, which is all about obtaining the evaluations to ensure that okay, controls are functioning as intended. Example, we have an internal audit team. They periodically review the compliance with IT control. So that something is there. So I will explain it with the example real time. So let's say example, you have a retail company. Okay. So you have a retail company. Okay. They want to ensure, they want to comply. So this is the company. They want to comply with SOX because they're going to public listing. So when they want to go public listing and all that, they will publish the financial reports. They have to demonstrate how you generating this report and all that. So as I said, the first step is control alignment. First step is called as a control alignment. So company establish the governance policies required IT to safeguard financial data. And here we adopting ITGC also. So COSO is closely involved with ITGC. Because COSO talk about what is a control, IT talk about a specific control. Like we set up the role-based access for the ERP system and ensure only finance staff can access the financial record. Second is we do gap assessment, we do risk assessment. So company identify unauthorized system changes as a key risk. So with the help of ITGC, we implement the control. Then company require daily backups and all that. That's part of a control activity. Okay, they have to requiredly report the compliance reporting and all that regulatory. That's called information communication. And with the help of KPI and KRI, you do the metrics. So COSO is essential for an organization because it provides structured approach to the internal controls that support the reliable financial reporting. As a public listing, financial reporting is very important, and you also need to demonstrate that you have adequate control over financial reporting. So by using COSO, you can help the organization to establish the control over financial reporting, which is a primary requirement of SOX to reduce the error and prevent the fraud, which is crucial for public companies. Second is it enhances the risk management. As I said, by the COSO, we can able to integrate the enterprise risk management. We can able to improve the organization ability to adapt and succeed in a risk-driven environment. Third, we can comply with SOX, GDPR. Okay, then operational efficiency. So by establishing a COSO, you can able to communicate the channels. It helps to streamline the operations, reducing the ineffectiveness and everything. And the most important part is here is building the stakeholder confidence. So now let's understand how to integrate ITGC with COSO. So here I have an example, control environment. So that control environment, if you want to implement, we have a ITGC control area, which is called IT governance leadership. So ITGC ensures secure IT environment by defining roles and responsibility. So IT department enforce code of conduct, ensure all employees follow the cybersecurity practice. Second is called as a risk assessment. So ITGC, IT risk management, identifies as the risk. Control activity, so we implement the ITGC controls here. multi-factor authentication, information communication. So we have a system logging reporting. So accurately report is there. And then we have a monitoring. So this is the ITGC we are integrating with COSO. So as I said, why ITGC COSO together are essential, because the one thing is that foundation for compliance for organization, that they need to be comply with SOX, okay, or other regulations. So COSO provide the overall framework. COSO is provide the overall framework. Okay, while ITGC ensure that IT systems are comply with the security assurance, accuracy, reliability standard. Second is comprehensive risk management. So COSO address the organization risk at all the level, while ITGC specifically focus on risk associated with the IT system. Third is consistent control environment. So ITGC actually support the COSO, okay, by enforcing control in IT environment and making sure the organization systems and data are secure and consistent with COSO principle. So in summary, you can say COSO provide the overall framework for internal control, and one of the internal controls, which is called IT controls, implement with the help of ITGC. That is how it works. So I'll give an example here, like access control, ITGC and COSO. So COSO control environment emphasizes the importance of security and ethical use of resources. I agree. So with the help of ITGC, we can implement the access controls and everything. Second is we have a change management and COSO. So COSO control activity focus to ensure the tasks are performed according to policy. So we adopt the ITGC here, by which we introduce a change management control to ensure all changes to IT systems are authorized and everything. So we have some other examples like, control environment like set the organization tone, integrity, authenticity. And based on that, ITGC controls established policies and everything, because policy is a driving factor for any organization. Then we have a risk assessment, identify, analyze risk. And we assess the risk, IT risk. Control activities, implement the policies. ITGC include the access control policies. Ensure information flow, the level of awareness, which is part of a COSO. And with the help of ITGC, we convey with the help of security awareness. Regularly review, and that can be achieved in the ITGC by introducing a KPI, KRI and everything. See, one of the IT control that we used is COBIT. So if you're into GRC, it is very important for you to know COBIT. And in my previous example, I've shown an IT governance framework. COBIT we have referred there. So COBIT is now adopted by ISACA, and it provides the guideline and best practice for aligning the IT operation with business goals. So let's say example, there is a bank. Okay, so there is a bank. The bank was so far doing offline business. Now they want to go online because they want a customer base. So it was a corporate governance requirement that they want to go digital. So they will give an instruction to the CIO, build something around automation. So here what happened, corporate governance evaluate the need of the bank, and then based on that giving a direction to CIO. CIO will adopt the ITGC framework, IT governance framework. So one of the framework is called COBIT. Now, if I don't go for COBIT, if I want to implement security, for security, we have a particular standard which is called 27001. For BCMS, we have a standard called 22301, 22301. Then if you want to implement the service management, we have a 20,000. And if you want to implement quality, we have a 9001. So you can imagine each and every process, you have a different standard. So it is very difficult for me to implement all these standards on a one go. So what happened is I adopt the COBIT, which capture all the best practice for IT function. It capture service management activities, it capture your quality, it capture the BCMS and everything. So I will adopt those practice, and later stage, I can go one by one. I will adopt the standard to improve the particular process and practice. So today, if you notice, most of the companies use COBIT framework because COBIT is foundation for IT controls, and your security comes under the COBIT. So what is the purpose of COBIT? The first is that COBIT provides the framework for IT governance and ensure IT align with the business. Okay. COBIT also helps us to implement the control based on a risk management, and more important, you can comply with the controls and functions parameter. So we have a key components. So we have overall two. So COBIT has comprised the controls in two sections. One is called EDM, which is directed by corporate governance, and APO, which is driven by the management function. So in COBIT, corporate governance is corporate governance, but IT and information security, they don't call governance, they call management. So corporate governance have a three function, EDM, evaluate the need of stakeholder and giving a direction to CIO and CISO. And management is responsible, which is called CIOCs, or responsible plan, build, run, and monitor. Okay. So first is that COBIT is basically aligned with these functions. Okay. And let's say example, there's a bank. Okay. So when you're talking about EDM here, so EDM domain, ensure that business goals and ensure risk are optimized if they're going digital. And on the other side, APO, align, plan, and organize. Actually, it's one of the functions. So align, plan, organize is one of the functions. So they all are part of one parameter, which is called PBRM. PBRM. Plan, build, run, and monitor. So that's one of the key feature we have. And based on that, we can plan the control, build the control, run the control, manage the control. Each and every parameters have this APO and other things. Is it clear? Second is each and every control, whatever you implement, it has a detailed guideline and everything. So that's something we can take. So as I said, COBIT is a IT governance framework that we can use. Okay. And they have a controls and control objectives, which can be implemented with the help of respective standard. So COSO is a high level framework for managing organization risk. Okay, COBIT is align the IT governance with management. Okay, and ITGC are the essential controls within the IT that COBIT use to enforce IT governance and supporting a COSO, a broader internal control environment. So COSO is the framework that we first adopt. COBIT is talk about what IT is required, and specific IT controls for that we can use the ITGC. So that is the first part of the GRC analyst. The second part is when you're implementing these controls, we implement with the help of risk management. Okay. So before I move to the risk management detail, I want to discuss the basics first. So risk is exist when threat has a potential to exploit the vulnerability and cause the harm. Before going to discuss about the risk, let's understand the basics of threats and vulnerability. So let's say example, this is my system A. Okay, when I say system A has a weak password, this weak password is the component of the system, persistent in the system, and that is called as a vulnerability. Always remember, in the information security, what you can control is a vulnerability only. Let's say example, you're preparing for some interviews. Okay, your weakness is English speaking. So now that is a weakness, and threat is what question they can ask from that area. Understood? So they might ask some English questions. It is difficult for me to answer. So vulnerability is a weakness. Threat is an action which exploit the vulnerability. So if for you, when you go for any interview, interviewer who are going to ask you question is a threat. So threat is an action which exploit the vulnerability. Is it clear? That's why we say risk exists when threat has a potential to exploit the vulnerability. Here for me, risk is like losing business. Risk is like failing the exam. Risk is losing the money. So difference between the risk and incident is, so if you take an example, we have a risk here versus incident. Incident is a confirmed action which has already happened. So I already failed the exam. It's not a risk. It's already an incident which has occurred. Okay, I already failed my exam. That's an incident. If I don't prepare this, and if the question come in the exam, I might fail. That is a risk. So risk is called as a probability. Risk is not a confirmed action. Confirmed action, if it's already occurred, then it's an incident. So risk is the potential for loss, damage, or any other undesirable outcome resulting from a given action or event or decision. Is it clear? I repeat again, risk is a potential for loss, damage, or any other undesirable outcome resulting from a given action or event or decision. So it is a likelihood that a particular threat will exploit the vulnerability leading to a negative impact, and that leading to a negative impact is a representation of a risk. So one more example is we have a system A. Okay. Hacker find the vulnerability in the system A, which is called weak password, through which he gain access to the system and through which he can gain access to the sensitive data. And that is a loss of data for the organization. That sensitive data loss is called as a risk. I don't want to lose that. So when we calculating a risk, we use the formula called risk equal to likelihood and impact. That is how you measure the level of risk. Okay. Likelihood means probability of happening. So let's say example, this system is connected on the internet. and the system is configured with some known configuration, open ports and all that. So likelihood of the threat to exploit this vulnerability is high because system is connected on the internet. So I give the likelihood is basically suppose high. If he hack, he can gain access to the PI data, which is a loss for me. That is basically called as an impact. So impact is also high. So overall risk value is, we say, high. In my case, if I don't prepare the topic, I might lose the money $760. That is a money I will lose, $760. That is a risk. Okay. So key component of a risk is likelihood and impact. So likelihood means the probability the risk event will occur. And risk event will be occur based on threat exploit the vulnerability. And if it occur, what is the impact? That is called as a severity of the consequences if risk is materialized. So next topic is called as a threat. So threat is anything within the organization which cause harm to the organization. Always remember, threat is always dynamic in nature. And threat is something you can't control, like natural disaster, you can't control, interview question, you can't control. So threat can be deliberated, which is called cyber attack, or it can be accidental, which is called natural disaster. And they create a risk when it coupled with the vulnerability. So for your information, when we're talking about threat is two type. Okay, threat is actually two type. One is called as an internal threat, and one is called as an external threat. So we have a two type of threat, internal threat and external threat. Internal threat is like insider threats, human error or mismanagement, like coffee fell on the server, or employee click on the phishing link. That is an internal threat. External threat is like cyber attacks, phishing malware, natural disaster and all that. Next is called as a vulnerability. So vulnerability is a weakness or gap in a system or process which can exploit by the threat, and vulnerability increase the likelihood of a risk materializing the impact. So that is where. So overall formula of risk is risk equal to likelihood and impact. High risk, low risk, medium risk, it's definitely calculated based on this value. And likelihood mean threat exploit the vulnerability. And if it happen, it lead to the what level of impact. So next important thing, we need to understand the risk metric or metrics. See, when you're talking about risk management, there's a one statement we called as a risk management. Okay. And for your information, I already created dedicated video on the risk management, how to start from a scratch in a YouTube video. So you can check that. Okay. And I will also try to share the same in a description box. So I'm not going to discuss a practical aspect here because the purpose of this video is to give you visibility about all the topics so that you can do the mastery in each and everything. And I really made a 55 minutes video on only on risk management, where I already discussed about this, how to set all this thing. Is it clear? So I'm going to spend very less time on this area. So when we're talking about risk functions, when we start risk, so we have some steps, because we're talking about risk management here, right? So ultimate goal of risk management is to reduce risk to an acceptable level. Now please listen this carefully. Let's say example, in my house, my dad is the one who take care of the house. Okay. Mom is a housewife. So what happen is whatever the income it is generated by dad. So he has a fixed budget. In that budget, we have to drive the entire house. So suppose my dad used to getting a salary about 10,000 rupees, hypothetical scenario. In that 10,000, he has to pay school fees and everything. Now, one day what happened, I asked dad, Papa, I need a PlayStation. Now he saw that budget. Okay. Can I get this PlayStation 10? Definitely no, because PlayStation minimum start for 35,000 rupees. And then he also do the assumption. Okay. If I give him today PlayStation, okay, what is the threat? The threat is basically, he will not be well prepared for the exam. The vulnerability is that he will weak in the specific area because he will give more time to the games and all that. And what is the risk? He might lose the focus on the exam. He might lose the focus on the studies. And it will be a career parameter for him. So dad assess all this risk. And if I give him the PlayStation, it will impact a budget. We will run out of the budget. We will not able to sustain for a month. So here you notice. So see, there is a person in my house, okay, who do the risk assessment before taking any action. One day what happened is I asked him, Papa, can we go to Goa? So Papa, what he did, he assessed the threat. Okay, what is the threat in Goa? Like, full of water, beer, drinks and all that, my son might drink, because my son is also having a vulnerability that, okay, if anyone offer him drink, he will say yes to that. Okay, so that's a vulnerability, and the risk is I might lose my son and he will spoil his life. So here what happen is we do risk management in a real life also. But when we're doing a risk assessment, we have to set some parameter. So based on that only we do risk assessment. And that parameter is what is the risk capacity, what is the risk appetite, and what is the risk tolerance. So let's say, so risk appetite mean that it's actually the thing we set first, capacity. What is the maximum risk I can take to pursue the mission and vision of an organization? That is called as a capacity. Okay. Second is called as a risk appetite. Risk appetite is an amount and type of risk it's pursued to achieve the strategic objective. And third is basically called as a risk tolerance. Risk tolerance is basically my current risk. So let's say example, $10,000 is the salary of my dad now. So he decided, okay, every month $2,000 he will spend on my education. So 10,000 is my risk capacity, and risk appetite he said 2,000 for my education. One day what happened, I told him, Papa, there's a new training is coming which costs $2,500. So in that case, the risk tolerance is going beyond the 2,000, which is current risk tolerance now become $2,500. Okay, so risk capacity is the maximum risk. Appetite is basically the parameter that we said, and risk tolerance is the current risk. So risk tolerance is always deviation nature. Same like I'm riding a car. So speed limit we said is 60, which is appetite. 120 is a maximum, but the current is basically 70, which is called as a tolerance. Okay. So based on this factor only, we drive the risk management function. So risk management, ultimate goal of risk management is to reduce a risk to an acceptable level. Okay. When we hire anyone, when we fire anyone, we do risk assessment. So in the risk management, the first step is called risk identification. So let's say example, we identify server, web server. Okay. So this is my web server. Then we identify threat is DOS or DDoS attack is possible on my server if it's exposed on the internet. And vulnerability is that we don't have a redundant server. So if the server is down, it has a big impact. So identify asset, web server and all that. Identify threats, the triggers which exploit my server, and vulnerabilities mean through which they can able to exploit the system. Now in this particular stage, we identify the risk. You know, there is a likelihood. Okay, but still we need to calculate the impact. So to calculate the level of impact, we do the next step, which is called as a risk analysis. So we have a two way to analyze the risk. One is called as a qualitative and one is called as a quantitative. Qualitative is like a scenario. Okay, if the likelihood is low, okay, likelihood is there, it will be the value called high, low, medium. So that is called qualitative risk assessment. It is same like, you know, someone reach out to me and say how much it will impact my body if I smoke. Okay, it will be high. I'm not telling about the percentage, but I'm saying high, low, medium. So same like server is there. Okay, connected with the internet. The likelihood is the DDoS attack can be possible. And server is down, the impact is high. I don't know the number, but impact is high. So here it is doing a qualitative risk assessment. But on the other side, quantitative risk assessment where we calculate the impact in the dollars. So we use some formulas. Okay, so we use a formula like ALE, annual loss expectancy, SLE, single loss exposure, exposure factor. So in the video, I have covered all these things. Or the second parameter is if the attack is happening in every 1 year, the value we given is 5. If it's happening in every 6 months, sorry, if the event is happening in once in a month, the value is 5. In every 6 months, the value is basically 4. If it's happening in a 1 year, the value is 3. And if it's impact my PI data, the value is 5. Impact is my regular data. Impact is 4. Operation data, business data is 3. So here we identify server is there connected on the internet. Definitely anything connected on the internet vulnerable for DOS attack. So chances that it can be happen every month. So likelihood is basically I give 5. And if it compromise, it can able to hack the PI data. So impact is also 5. So overall value I given is 25. So that is my current risk. So during a risk analysis, we try to analyze the current level of risk. So which one is faster to perform? Qualitative, which is accurate, quantitative. Okay. Then we have a risk evaluation. So risk evaluation means whatever the impact value we'll try to map with my risk capacity, risk appetite, and risk tolerance. So right now 25 is my risk tolerance. Is it going above the appetite? Yes. So we have to bring the control to bring the risk below the acceptable level. Is the risk is going above the capacity? Yes. So in that case, we avoid the risk. So during the risk evaluation, we evaluate the result against my capacity, my appetite, my tolerance. So that based on that, you can take a final call. You want to avoid the risk, you want to mitigate the risk, you want to accept the risk, you want to transfer the risk. Risk avoidance means I will not go for that trip which bring more risk to my company. I know the risk is going beyond my capacity. So it's better drop the idea. So in that case, I will go for risk avoidance. I will implement the control. That's called mitigation. I will accept the risk because cost is high. So that's called risk acceptance. Or we transfer the risk to the insurance. That's called risk transfer. I will give an example. Okay. CISSP exam. Okay. Cost me 745. My salary itself is 15,000 rupees. I know even I pass the exam, I will not get any hike. So I'd better drop the idea because if I fail, I have to pay from my pocket $80,000, 80,000 rupees. So in that case, I assess my weakness that I'm weak in cryptography. I'm weak in GRC. If they ask the question from the area, I might not able to pass the exam. So it's better I will drop that CISSP, which bring risk to my company. So in that case, risk capacity, risk tolerance going beyond the capacity. That's why I avoid the risk. Second is called as a risk mitigation. I implement the control to bring the risk to an acceptable level. Risk acceptance means that cost of training is $10,000. Exam is 755. It's better I will ignore the training and directly go for the exam because cost of control is higher than cost of impact. So that's called risk acceptance. And we transfer the risk to third party like cyber insurance and all that. That is called as a risk transfer. And after that, we set the KRI, key risk indicators, and KPI, which inform the management. Each and everything I've discussed in that video, do check that. Okay. The reason of, in this video, I'm just want to give a quick overview. Okay. So risk identification, start with brainstorming, category and everything. Risk analysis, all about evaluate each risk and prioritize. Then mitigation plan, we develop the mitigation strategies. For that activity, we do is setting the response strategy, implement the control. Then we have a risk monitoring and reporting where we carefully monitor, report the risk and everything, and we track the KRI also. And then finally we communicate and integrate. So we have a training, decision making process, risk aware culture, all those things will be done in this particular activity. So the last part is important for the governance, which is called security policies or policy. One thing we need to understand, policy is the foundation of any organization. Okay, when you hire anyone, when you fire anyone, for that everything we create a policy. And based on risk assessment, when we implementing control, we first create a policy. You can say policy is a foundation. So let's say example, why we create a policy, that's a very important thing. So let's say example, we have a vision of the company. We have a mission of the company. We have a business requirement. We have a legal requirement. We have a stakeholder requirement. So we have a different type of requirement. Now it is not possible for me, the people who are working on my organization like people, process and technology, they can follow individually all these things. So it is always a senior management intention that everyone should follow the vision mission of the company. And that is why the first thing they create a policy. Seem like the parents creating a rules for us to give a good life, disciplined life. Same like, now let's say example, policy is a need of the organization, policy is a vision of the organization, policy is a statement of the company. Or you can say policy is like a intent of the management. Hey guys, every system need to be protected with a password. So that is a policy. Now employees say, okay, fine, I will follow this password, but what is a password? So that is basically we have a standard. Standard is a 8 character. Then detailed procedure, how to create a 8 character password and all that is called as a procedure. That's why here, if you can notice, the first step is policy. Okay. Then we have a standard. Like policy say that all customer data must be protected from unauthorized access and handling in compliance with data privacy law, because we have to comply with GDPR. Now second is called as standard which is uniform across the organization. Okay, we have to use AES 256 to encrypt the data. Then we talk about the step-by-step procedure. Guideline is always optional in nature. Okay, so like recommend the best practice for staffing handling customer data. And finally, we have a baseline. Baseline is specific minimum required security configuration. So baseline come into the picture when you're using a specific technology hardening. Let me give one more example. So I say all employee must use strong password to protect system and data, but password must be at least 12 character, including a mix of upper, lower and character. Baseline is at minimum password must be at least 12 character long with one special character, one number one. So this is like minimum, we cannot go below that. Procedure is go to log into system, change the password, and guideline is in 90 days it's always recommend to change the password or never use a family name. So if you can see Jack Daniel example, everyone at the family gathering must have a drink. The drink must be Jack Daniel. That's a standard for everyone 21 and old. At least one glass of any drink, water must be consumed. Go to the bar and have that. It is recommended every drink responsible for hydrate with the water. So when we say policy set the broad rule. Okay. Purpose is specific exact requirement to support the policy. Then we set the minimum acceptable level to comply with policies called baseline. Provide the step-by-step instruction. So you check my policy document video, which also give you great visibility. So one thing always remember, the sequence is like that: strategy, then we have a policy, then we have a program, and then we implement that in the organization. So policy is always strategic in nature. So now we understood the basic fundamentals. Now time for an action. Let's implement governance in the organization. Okay. Now it's time for an action, and now we're going to discuss about how to implement GRC in the organization. So far we understand the core GRC concepts, where we discuss about GRC, 3-level defense. We also familiarize with the frameworks like COSO, COBIT, NIST, and 31000. We also understand about regulatory and compliance requirement, and now we're going to discuss about how to implement GRC. See, when you're talking about GRC, the first step is called preparation and initial assessment. Okay. So here, like I join as a ITGC consultant or I join as a GRC analyst. So what is my first step? I will speak to the business team. I will speak to the senior management, stakeholder, understand the business objectives, regulatory requirement and specific compliance need. And here we basically prepare two important documents, which is called as a business requirement document and stakeholder analysis. Now, when you're talking about business requirement document, okay, so business requirement document, it's outline the organization objectives, and also we document the GRC goals and specific requirement that need to be aligned with GRC effort. If you take example, like if you're building a GRC document, so there are some tips and tricks that I will recommend. Actually, different company have a different name for this, but standard term is called as a business requirement document. Okay, so you can involve the stakeholder from various department like IT, legal, finance to ensure, and you have to involve them early. So you want to ensure you capture the full range of perspective, and here you can use a questionnaires or survey to gather initial inputs on GRC related needs. And by having some defined questions, it can speed up your information gathering process and ensure that broad coverage has been covered. Along with that, when you're talking about business requirement document, one thing you need to have in this called scope. Scope is very important. So you need to define the scope and objectives. It's a very important part. So you can break down the GRC objective into specific measurable goals. Like example, this year I want to implement 27001. Next year you want to go for SOC 2. And in order to measure that, you can use a SMART matrix. It is always advisable. So by using a SMART matrix like specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time bound, you can define each objectives. Third is when you're creating a BRD document, in that you make sure you define the list of regulatory requirement. So when you're building a governance, you make sure you should meet the legal regulatory requirement. And here you can also create one more document, which is called as a regulatory matrix. Regulatory matrix. Now, what is regulatory matrix? Regulatory matrix in the BRD listing the key regulations, their related GRC goals and departmental responsibility. Make sure you can use this template consistency. So you can have one standard which can be followed everywhere. And we have to review and validate with the key stakeholders. Second is called as a stakeholder analysis. That's another important step we have. So when you're talking about stakeholder analysis, it is all about identifying individual and group who influence or affect by the GRC program. So In the stakeholder analysis, we can include the representative from our critical functions like IT, compliance, legal. And we also use a influential interest matrix to categorize the stakeholder based on the influence over the interest in the GRC program. So for me, senior management has a more influence on GRC program. Okay, so that something is there. And when you're creating the stakeholder analysis document, you should assess the need of the stakeholders. Like you can create a simple stakeholder need assessment table where you can list each stakeholder's primary concerns. Let's say in this way. This is how the table look like. Okay, very simple. And then on the one side, you can mention the list of stakeholders. Then second section, you can basically add the list of concerns they have. Okay, you can add the concerns. And then you can basically document the business requirement. So by following this particular thing, this is also called a stakeholder need assessment. Okay. So all the stakeholders' primary concerns, regulatory priorities, and communication preference we can document. And it is also very important to develop the stakeholder communication plan. You know, whatever the activity doing in GRC and all that, you need to schedule and inform the activities. And make sure you should have a buy-in approval. So moral of the story is that this is the first two documents that we prepare when you're building a GRC. Okay, business requirement document and stakeholder analysis. This is how it looked like. So if you can see there, BRD engage stakeholder early, tricks use questionnaire, SMART goals, regulatory metrics. Now stakeholder analysis is all about identifying stakeholders by influencing the clarify the roles, assess need and create. And we can use some kind of a documents under the stakeholder analysis such as influence matrix, RACI chart, assessment table and color coded communication schedule. So once you define the GRC objective, the next step is identify the key regulatory and compliance requirement, because definitely we need to follow top-down approach. So we have two documents here. One is called regulatory requirement checklist, where you can list the regulation and standards applicable. And second is called as a compliance assessment mapping, where you need to match the regulation to a business process. Let's say example, I join finance industry in India. So I know I need to be comply with SEBI. I want to comply with RBI. So I'm assuming this must be there. Okay. This must be there. So we have some industry specific regulation, like we verify the checklist include. So like if you take an example of checklist, when you're creating a checklist, there's a small tip I would like to suggest. So when you're organizing a checklist, you can organize the checklist in I think 3 or 4 format. Example, within a checklist, you can have an industry specific regulation. Second is basically called as a geographic requirement. Then we have a data protection, privacy standard. Then we have a cyber security standard. Okay. So you can create a checklist and organize in this format. So we can have one checklist, but in that we can organize into group. Example, when I say industry specific, like we have a SOX, we have a HIPAA and all that. Now, if you go by the geographic requirement, which is called regional law, like in US, if you take example, we have a CCPA. In Europe, we have a GDPR. Then data protection standards we are using here. Okay, then we have a cyber security standard NIST or PCI-DSS. So this is how you can able to create a checklist. Second is called as a compliance requirement mapping. So compliance requirement mapping is another important thing. This document map each regulation or standard to a specific business process. Okay, that's something we have. So regulatory requirement checklist talk about list of regulations that is applicable for my organization. And then compliance requirement mapping talk about which business map to which regulatory requirement. So ultimate goal of creating this document is to align your, what is called, it is objective is to align the requirement with the business process. So you can map each regulation or requirement to a relevant business process like GDPR, SOX and all that. We also talk about the control objectives and specific controls, where we identify which controls are needed for each compliance requirement. Okay. One activity we do here is we do the gap identifications, where we actually flag area where no current control exists to meet the specific compliance requirement. And these gaps will require the remediation. And then we do the framework mapping, where you identify which standards or framework can meet the regulatory requirement. And then we assign risk level based on the regulatory penalties and do the audit. So that something is a process we follow. Okay. It's a very simple thing, very, very simple stuff. First, you list down the regulations and then you can list down the regulation map with the business requirement. Next is, so first step is we understand the business requirement in the first step, another stakeholder, and then you create a regulatory requirement checklist based on a business understanding and compliance requirement. And then you will do gap assessment. See what we have and what we need to implement. That's the important thing. Instead of starting from zero, I repeat, instead of starting from zero, we do with the gap assessment, okay, where we are and what we need to achieve. So gap analysis report identify difference between the current practice and required standard. So there's a tip and trick I will suggest. First, clarify the scope. Okay, so my suggestion is that first you can clarify the scope. What is the scope you have? Okay. Clarify the scope for gap analysis. Are you assessing a specific area like data security, regulatory, or overall GRC? But my suggestion is that use a scoping matrix to map each area. Example, you have IT security control against the ISO 27000. So it is easy for stakeholder to see what the analysis has been covered. Second important thing, use a standard compliance. Use standard compliance. That's a very important part. Use a standard compliance. Choose a relevant framework like COBIT, COSO for a benchmark practice. Otherwise, if you have experience, you remember all the controls, you can do that. But I highly recommend, if any business you have a doubt, involve the subject matter expert. Hold a structured review or workshop session with SMEs using a prepared questionnaire to cover all the relevant area. And then you document the gaps. And then whatever the gap you identify, you can recommend them. So that is basically called as a gap analysis report. Now in this gap analysis, you documenting possible risk. It's not something confirmed risk, possible risk. Okay, these controls are not there. This is the possible risk. So that's something we document in the risk register. It is always good. Risk assessment start with the possible risk. So we organize the risk into category like operational risk, regulatory risk, cybersecurity risk, reputation risk. Okay, that's something we do. And based on that, we create a risk register. So when you're creating a risk register, use a sample risk statement, like you can write each risk in a clear, concise statement. So if you really want to understand how to do that, so we use one tip. We use one tip. Okay, I will show you how I note down the risk statement. So example like due, okay, to cause there is a risk of event resulting in impact. So this is how the statement should be used for risk statement. Example like we said, due to cause there is a risk of an event resulting in the impact. Let me give an example. So due to cause mean lack of access control. Due to lack of access control. Okay, there's a risk of unauthorized access event. And that result into data breaches. So when you're writing a risk statement, you can use this formula and estimate each risk likelihood impact, even, if approximate to provide the sense of urgencies from 1 to 5 and all that. So you can, based on a gap analysis, you can identify the risk. Okay, and you can create a risk register. So that's why we say risk register should be created as early as possible, which is mostly in the risk identification stage. So gap analysis report, define the scope. We use a framework against that. We do the assessment. So it uses scoping matrix, checklist, gap descriptions, and then we have an initial risk register where we start with categorizing using a clear statement, and we use a format from 1 to 5. So now next step is building a core policy and framework. So policies are introduced at this stage because based on a gap, you identify some controls are required. And if you want to implement those controls, you need a policy first. So policy is the first thing. So policy are introduced at this stage because they provide the framework guideline. So if one of the framework, CISO framework or COBIT framework says information security need to be implemented because that is a control we identify. So first we implementing information security policy. So we draft the policy covering all the critical area. Now policy is also two type. One is called as a singular policy where you create a single policy for everything. And then called as a group policy. Group policy means we have one policy document which cover all the policies. One thing always remember, when you're creating a policy, involve the stakeholders, because policy is the first tool by which you comply with your legal regulatory requirement. So we have some samples here. Now, once you create a policy, you define the standard and procedures. Okay, so you create a SOPs, detailed requirement, and then you will map the procedure with the respective framework. So you can choose a document framework like COBIT is there, IT governance, so ISO 2031000 for risk management, and COSO for financial controls. But if you ask me, COSO will be the starting point. That is the first thing. And then you can have a COBIT on top of it. And then you can have a pillar of standards, which is called ISO 27001 and 22301. So we can create a framework mapping document, which basically shows how a selected framework align with your organization compliance need. I'll show you how to do that, how to select and map the framework. So let's discuss that. So if you have a control framework with you, which COSO, COBIT and all that, and your requirement is, suppose I want to strengthen the data protection of a customer employee. That is my requirement. Now here I've aligned the framework 27001 GDPR requirement regulatory in HIPAA is healthcare. So I use this matrix. So I'm looking for strengthened data protection. So I will pick the control from 27001. GDPR HIPAA is a requirement. I want to improve the resiliency. So I will use NIST. To comply with the regulatory, we have SOX GDPR, and for enhancing data governance, we have a COBIT. So this is how you map the frameworks. Okay. Now next thing is that you need to break down each framework to a specific control. Okay. I already discussed in the beginning, difference in framework and standard. First, we adopt the framework, and then looking for the consistency, we go for the standard. So here, like I want to implement access control policy. Okay. I really find that standard in 27001, and I map that with my business's user access management HR onboarding. So in that, I introduce the 27001. I want to do IT risk assessment as a process. I want to introduce this as a process. Control requirement is IT risk management. COBIT is a framework, or ISO 31000. Then NIST ESF, which I'm introduced in having an incident response, a very good control that I'm introducing for one of the process, which is called IT incident management process. I want data subject consent, which is part of a GDPR. Why? Because this need to be mapped with my business process, which is called customer data management. And then we have a SOX financial reporting. For that, we have a financial accounting. So this is how you need to select and map the framework. So here it's very important. That's how you validate. Now, once you basically select the framework and define the control, the next step is risk assessment and control design. Okay, so now it's time to do the risk assessment. But initially also we did. So that is something called as a possible risk I'm assuming. Okay, and now that assumption will be assessed here based on a gaps. Okay, I want to comply. I want to prepare my company for GDPR, right? We just discussed. Okay, so let's say example is, so this is my company. This is my GDPR requirement. I assess current how many controls are compliant with GDPR. So that is a gap we have identified. But based on a gap, we need to identify the controls. But controls will be implemented based on risk assessment. Okay, if I don't have, what is the impact? So we do the risk assessment now, because I don't want to implement all the controls. So we introduce the risk assessment now because policy framework are established, providing a base for assessing a compliance. So we identify the risk. We analyze the risk, we treat the risk. Okay, so we engage department leaders to understand the operational risk and compliance, and we create one document here is risk register and risk assessment report. That's something we can go for it. Now next is called as a design and document the control. So based on risk assessment, we have to design, we have to select the controls, and there is a one document we prepare is control design document. So one thing we need to understand in the enterprise. Okay, in the enterprise, we have only three type of, we have a three type of control: preventive control, which a control used to prevent the incident; detective control, which detect the incident; and corrective is basically if anything happen, what is the reaction to that? Let's say example firewall. So firewall is an example of preventative. Firewall is an example of preventative. But if someone bypass the firewall, I want monitoring to be done. So SIEM ID is part of detective, and my incident response team will be part of corrective, which isolate the system and reduce the impact. So you can say preventive is a safeguard, detective and corrective are the countermeasures. So here we can see we create one document called control design document. In ISO 27001, it is called as a SOA, statement of applicability. So here you can see control ID is AC001. I just give my name. Control name is user access review. Objective of this control is prevent the unauthorized access. Owner is IT security manager. frequency is quarterly, need to be reviewed, and documentation is access review logs and approval records. So by this, we can validate the thing. So when you're introducing any control, you need to introduce the objective, owner, frequency, and documentation. So I believe this control is required. Now this control need to be implemented. With the help of that, we go for the risk mitigation plan, where we document the treatment strategies, responsible party, and timeline. So when you're presenting a risk, you document risk, you document threat, you document vulnerability, and you give recommendation. But action plan filled by the auditee only, customer only. And he also mentioned the date of the completion. So these two data will be filled by the customer, and this data will be filled by you. Okay, remember that. So now based on risk assessment, we decided we want to go for ITGC. We need to implement the control. That's the important part. So now time for the ITGC. So we deploy the control for data protection, access management, change management, and the document that we maintain is control implementation checklist, which track the deployment of each control, because that's very important. Or we can have a compliance control matrix, which link implement control as a regulatory requirement. My recommendation is that you can merge both and you can use one as a document. There's no point of creating a multiple document. So, it's always good that you can create one Excel sheet in which you can document everything. Like this is the risk. Okay, this is the control. This is mapped with NIST standard, and this is mapped with the regulatory requirement called SOX. So this is how you can create a table. Now, once you implement the table, okay, once you implement the control, so you create a document here like ITGC policy procedure, because any control you're introducing, you need to introduce a policy first, and then you can create an audit checklist, because based on the control what you implemented, you have to do the audit also. That is also very important part. So we have this implementation example, like I want to implement in my business access management area. What is the action is we need to create a policies, implement MFA and all that. So example like enforce quarterly access review, implement MFA for critical system. Second is you can see change management. So we need to establish a policy, set up the CAB and track, and we use a service now to log change or CAB approval. We need a backup and recovery function in the organization. So we can automate the backups, test and recovery, and we have a daily backups and financial system. Then IT operation and monitoring is there, which implement monitoring incident response. And then we have a continuous improvement. So this is just like a basic ITGC I am implementing. Now, once you implement the controls, now it's time for monitoring, because it's very important. We have to check is the control is working as per the business requirement, or is the control is working as per what we have agreed. So now we're talking about compliance. So as I said, we need to do monitoring also what we implemented. So we have an action plan to monitor the things, and we create a compliance monitoring plan. Example, we have a list down the process and we verify when to monitor. So normally what happens is, if we're talking about financial process, we do review financial process like yearly, and some other process we review in every 2 years. And other controls, if you want to monitor in a monthly basis, you can document that. Along with that, we can have a compliance dashboard, which give you the visibility about the current KPI and all that. You can set up the internal audit team in the organization, which outline the audit frequency and all that, and they can create reports, because it is their responsibility is to make sure whatever the control is working, it should be work as per the business objective. There's one more activity we do here is RCSA. So this is something which is done by the auditor, perform risk and control self-assessment, because once you implement the control, is it working effectively as per the business objective? So we do the RCSA. So we evaluate the control effectiveness, and we have one document called as a continuous improvement log, or you can say continuous control log. You don't need to create a multiple document. If you think one document can meet all the criteria, we can go for that. So this is how you implement the entire ITGC. Now it's time for training and awareness. Who is the weakest link in the organization is people. And no matter you have another best solution in this world, but if your employee is vulnerable, then it's a problem in terms of internal threats. So it's very important. You have to do the regular awareness and training for the employees. So one request is that the thin line difference in training and awareness is training modify the skill. Okay, and awareness modify the behavior. So here we develop the training sessions, make sure training material should have a policy overview and everything. And whenever any employee join, after signing the NDA and signing a contract, the first thing he should do is he should attend the awareness program. Post awareness program, we have attendance and all that. We have a quiz also by which we can able to track. But on a regular basis, we also send the phishing emails and all that and check how many are effective. But if you're really looking for building a matrix, so you can use two metrics, like before awareness training, how many people have reported an incident, and after awareness training, how many have been reported. If there's an increase in the number, it means it is effective. So if it's increase in the number, it shows the effectiveness of awareness training. Ultimate goal of awareness training is to make the employee aware about the responsibility. So they know, okay, what to report. So we reinforce the GRC, we do the regular communications. If any kind of a changes happen in the policy procedure level, we can update through the emails. Now it is time that we need to set up the audit functions. So we just discussed, we have first party, second party, third party. So here we're establishing the first party, which is called internal audit team. It's very important if you're having a GRC, it is very important to audit the GRC on a regular basis. And management also want to understand what is happening in the organization. So we have to set up the internal audit here. So we create an internal audit checklist and report. We also create an internal audit program. Internal audit program, it's also called as an internal audit charter, which talk about the presence of the team in the organization. Example, what is internal audit and what they do. So that document the internal audit charter. So we setting up the internal audit team. So we have a stages. So first stage is called planning. There's a dedicated video I made on internal audit. Okay, please check that. Amazing review. I got 1+ lakh review on that video, which I have taken one example. So do check that. Okay. So in the internal audit, we have organized the entire activity into the 4 sections. The first section is called as a planning, where we have an audit planning memo, document, risk assessment metrics, and audit program. Okay. Then we have a field work. So I'll explain you with the example, like I'm auditing a change management process. So I will basically create an audit planning memo, okay, about the purpose of internal audit, change management. This change management is applicable for the India division. The timeline will be 6 months. So that is something is called as a audit planning memo. Then we document the detailed steps and resources that will be taken care for this change management. Okay. And then we document the possible risk. Here we just assuming possible risk based on the data what we collected. And then we outline the audit test and procedure. That is part of a planning. Now I'm scheduling the interview with the auditee. So interview summary is there. We document the interview with the key people. Based on that, I document the request list. Like they said, okay, they close change in every 2 days. And every change has to be reviewed with the separation of duty. So I will ask for samples, which is part of the document request list. So here I will ask for the policy, procedure, and everything. The next important thing is called as a test work paper. So we capture the test results, because this work paper are your evidence. And then you have a test summary sheets where you document the findings, analysis, and recommendation. That summary sheet become the input for audit report. The first version of audit report is called as a draft audit report. That's something you need to get convey from a auditee. And once you're done with that, you have an exit meeting summary. You will have an action plan. You will give a recommendation action plan prepared by the auditee. So he given us some dates. Okay, on this date, we will close this finding. So we will do the follow up on the date to make sure they have closed this finding. So that is how the entire audit process works. We also have a second party audit where you audit the suppliers and all that. It is always good. Whatever the critical elements we have, we can create a checklist for that so that we can follow that checklist. And based on that, we audit the vendor before you onboard them. And third party audits are basically called when you face any regulatory audit, certification audit, and all that. There's a dedicated video I already made on 27001. So you can check that. So this is all from my side in this particular video. Do let me know, how do you find this video, and do you find something special in this content? Do you got something new insights? Do share your suggestion in comment box, and do let me know in comment box. Shall I continue this series? Thank you so much. And what is the best thing you like about this video? Do let me know. And without your love, I'm nothing. So please support if you think my content is worth. Do subscribe to the channel and click on the bell icon to make sure you should not miss the future videos on a similar topic. Good day. Bye.